510-7709. And hopefully, thanks, Kiz, great. Let's see. Our first question, once you're on menti.com, is what's one thing you can see from where you're sitting? This is a warm up. And as soon as you're here, just answer the question and, okay, great. At least one person has gotten in. Great. Great. Oh, the moon. That's nice. Okay, looks like somebody needs tech support. Kids, please reach out to William. Yeah, screens everywhere. That's relatable. Okay, we've heard from about a third of you all, so I'm gonna wait just another minute here. Hopefully more folks can log in. There will be some more substantial questions later on in the meeting, so as much as possible, we appreciate if folks could try to join the Menti poll. Share your feedback. Great, 16, we're getting there. Okay, and as folks get settled in, I'm going to move over to our next question. Please tell us your zip code. We're trying to collect some information about who's in the room today, who we're reaching. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, if you can't figure out Mentimeter, feel free to put your answers in the chat. We will compile all the information. We just want to make sure that we can hear from everyone in a way that's hopefully comfortable for you. So no worries if you can't get in. Kiz will do his best to help you out, but we will be reading the chat too. All right, great. And then you'll be prompted now to answer a couple of demographic questions. These are not going to be shared on the screen. These are just for our information to see who we're reaching with this meeting. So I will leave this up for just another couple of seconds here. And then even after I stop sharing my screen in a second, you can still stay in Mentimeter. You can continue filling in the questions. Okay, I think I will hand it back to the first presenter and stop sharing my screen now. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in a bit for a few more polls.
Okay, I'm again Frank Slusser, Snohomish County. I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Hope you're staying dry. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of the 2024 Comprehensive Plan update. So with the 2024 Comprehensive Plan update, Snohomish County is planning for a resilient, vibrant, and inclusive future where all residents have the opportunity to thrive. Based on regional estimates, Snohomish County is allocated a population growth of approximately 308,000 people countywide from 2020 to 2044. Now, that's a large amount of growth for our county. That's almost 3 Everetts coming to the county. This presents opportunities for us as well as some challenges. With new faces and voices, the county's economic opportunities, choices, and diversity will expand. And at the same time, the county must prepare for this growth to ensure it occurs in a way that is in line with our values, our goals, and maintaining our quality of life. So Snohomish County is updating its comprehensive plan, a document that sets out the vision for how Snohomish County will accommodate projected growth over the next 20 years out to the year 2044. An update to our comprehensive plan represents a rare. We are expected to do it once every 8 years. It's a rare opportunity for the public, elected officials, and experts to plan how to accommodate growth in the county in a way that preserves and enhances the quality of life for all of the county's communities. And we are eager to receive input from the public to help inform the planning process so that our planning going forward can have the changes will have a positive effect on our community. Next slide. The comprehensive plan includes a number of elements that we'll be reviewing over the course of the 2024 update. Land use element, the transportation element, parks and recreation, housing, ensuring that there is housing for all economic segments of the community, capital facilities, utilities, natural environment, economic development, and other topics, including a rural element. And we are also planning to include a sub-area plan with our comprehensive plan update for the core part of the Southwest County around the planned light rail stations to help plan for how those communities can grow with the opening of the light rail stations. And so again, the scoping process here, this is the start of a process that we hope you can all participate in and help us to have a successful update to our comprehensive plan over the next 3.5 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. So I'll cover some of the basics of the environmental impact statement or EIS process and some of the milestones. So the purpose of the environmental impact statement is to be an informational document that's prepared under the State Environmental Policy Act. And it's to share that information with the public and decision makers so that the county can weigh and balance the potential environmental effects of the comprehensive plan update on the natural and built environment. And the environmental impact statement will identify current conditions, so the affected environment. It'll share information about the growth alternatives, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. It'll identify if those alternatives are implemented, what are some potential impacts, and what are the measures that could help mitigate or reduce environmental impacts. So there's several points at which we're seeking the public and agency and tribal input. The first is a 30-day scoping period. We're in the middle of that scoping period. It started on November 1st and it goes till November 30th. And then once the scope of the EIS is set, then the team will prepare that environmental impact statement and it will be published for as a draft. And there will be between a 30 and 45-day comment period on that draft environmental impact statement. And then the final EIS will be a response to the comments that are received on the draft. And so I'll walk through a schedule that covers both the plan update and the EIS. It's meant to be an integrated process. So across the top, we have the milestones of the State Environmental Policy Act process. So we're here in fall with the scoping process. And at the same time, the county is conducting some visioning for the plan that Eileen mentioned in her introduction. And the county will then be working on setting growth targets and setting a docket of potential requests to change the future land use map and policies. And once that is set in winter 2022, then the team can begin work on the EIS, evaluating the alternatives. And we'll be preparing a draft for staff review, making sure we get the facts right. And then there will be a draft EIS issued, and that's anticipated in summer 2023. At that same time, there will be a draft plan document. To get from here to there, in addition to preparing that environmental impact statement, the county will be conducting meetings and getting input on those draft elements that Frank described for the comprehensive plan update. So there will be some activity between the scoping process early on and the community meetings to help develop the plan. And then once that plan and EIS are issued, there will be some public meetings through the Planning Commission and County Council. There will be a preferred plan developed and around which the final EIS can occur. So it will evaluate that preferred plan and it will respond to the comments received. The county is due to complete its work no later than June 2024. So the topics that have been identified for the EIS so far include the following, and that's one of the questions we have. What topics should be studied in the EIS? And that's part of this scoping process. We've identified natural systems, and that could include earth and geologic hazards, water resources, and plants and animals, air quality and greenhouse gas, land use and shoreline use, as well as consistency with plans and policies. That could be state policies, regional policies, and county policies, and cities as well. Population, housing, and employment, and environmental justice. So what is the effect of the alternatives on the health and well-being of vulnerable communities? Transportation, parks and recreation, cultural resources, and then energy and public services and utilities. Some of the topics really cross over multiple topics. So one of the areas we will be taking a look at is climate change and the potential effect on vulnerable populations. So we'll be coming up with some performance metrics and looking at the alternatives for how well they advance or present hurdles to climate resilience. So flooding and sea level rise is one aspect of climate change that we would look at using regional and local information. We will also be coming up with a review of equity and screening the alternatives for how well they advance or present hurdles to equity. We'll use information such as that available through the Washington Department of Health, which looks at social vulnerability to hazards. It also looks at noise and air quality and other aspects of health conditions and vulnerability. So we kind of put this information together in terms of who's vulnerable by who might be exposed to an environmental hazard, such as a climate change effect, who's sensitive to that hazard because of age or health, and how well the community or environment can adapt to stressors related to climate change. So some of the things that might be looked at there for capacity to adapt could include linguistic isolation. So people that speak English less than very well may have more hurdles in terms of information available, and emergency evacuation, for example. So we'll be presenting some information about different demographic characteristics as well as environmental characteristics regarding who may be vulnerable. So this is some information here on the right that we've collected around speaking a language other than English at home and differences in the county as a whole. We have a little bit higher population in the unincorporated UGAs that speaks a language other than English compared to the county as a whole. So we wanted to share a little bit more about alternatives, and then Frank will dive into that in a little bit. But again, to kind of go back to the purpose of the EIS, we spent time on the environmental topics that the EIS would cover, but those environmental topics will be weighed and balanced in terms of alternatives for the comprehensive plan update, so that we would look at the potential environmental impacts of those alternatives. And again, we're here tonight and through that written comment process to hear what is on your mind about the scope of the environmental impact statement, to make sure we study the right topics and that we study a range of growth alternatives. And it is great to see that so many of you were able to attend this evening, and we will look forward to your comments because you live and work and play in Snohomish County, and we want to make sure we get that set of topics right and set the range of alternatives correctly as well. So I'm going to transition back to Frank, who's going to talk to you about the environmental impact statement alternatives and the comprehensive plan update.
Thank you, Lisa. Next slide, thank you. So under state law, we are required to study at least 3 different alternatives for our environmental impact statement. We are required to have a no action alternative. So essentially what our current plan allows. And that doesn't mean that that is a good option or an option that is likely to be the one that we adopt, but it is required under state law, and it helps to provide something to compare the environmental impacts that we would expect from the other action alternatives to see what the difference would be. So we are required to have a no action alternative and at least 2 action alternatives. One of the action alternatives must include the adopted growth targets that Snohomish County tomorrow and the County Council are currently developing. We expect those to be adopted soon. One of our alternatives will need to account for those initial growth targets that the County Council adopts. When thinking about developing the alternatives, another consideration is having bookends. So if we expect that it's possible that there could be a range of that it's likely to be considered as a preferred alternative eventually, having at least one of the alternatives that is perhaps goes beyond what we would expect to be adopted, but would encompass what would be likely. That ensures that we're studying all the possible impacts, and it keeps us on track to be able to meet our deadline of June 2024 for adopting an updated plan. So also thinking about the action alternatives, one of the things is to have a variation in some of the concepts so that we can see and test out what the differences would be with the environmental impacts. With the land use alternatives that we're presenting tonight, these only affect the unincorporated areas. So the proposal would be that we would consider the cities to accommodate their initial growth targets, and we would hold that constant across all 3 scenarios. And the variation that we would be measuring would be the differences in policies for the unincorporated area. The alternatives that we're presenting here as part of the scoping, these are draft alternatives, and they can still be revised. We do expect them to be revised based on public comment that we received during the scoping process. And there are also some details that we are still waiting on decisions to be made by the County Council. So that includes adopting the initial growth targets. And also the County Council needs to set which of the docket requests. So those are the public requests for individual properties to have changes to the zoning and the future land use designation for those properties. The deadline for submitting those applications was last year, but we are reviewing those, and the County Council is expected to make a decision on which of those docket requests will be studied, will be included for further study. That decision expected no later than February next year. So again, the land use alternatives that we are presenting as part of the scoping are draft, and we do expect there to be revisions. And we are interested in the comments about whether these approaches that we have taken are the right approaches. Now, at this point, the alternatives are being presented in a narrative form. We have a graphic for each one that shows the difference of the distribution of growth. But we want to hear from the public and from other agencies about whether these are the right approaches before we take the next step of actually developing the zoning amendments and the future land use maps that would go along with those alternatives. After we do hear from the public during the scoping period, and we do have the decisions from the county council on the growth targets and on the docket, we will be finalizing a scoping report that would summarize the information that we got from the scoping. And we expect that that will be released in March 2022 to identify the final versions of the alternatives that we expect that will be studied in the draft environmental impact statement. And we will then move into the process of preparing the maps for the zoning and land use designations and working on the analysis. Next slide. So as I noted, currently there's a regional projection that we need to plan for approximately 308,000 people. So that's in addition to our current population of approximately 828,000. And this is the growth allocation that's coming out of the Vision 2050. And this graph shows how that compares to the Office of Financial Management projections that came out in 2017. And under state law, we are required to plan to be within that range of projections from the Office of Financial Management. And the median projection is the one that is considered to be the most likely scenario. And in the past, the median projection has tracked consistent with the actual growth in our county. So it does make sense to plan consistent with that growth. One of the complications that we face is that the next set of state projections that are required under the Growth Management Act will not be available until late next year, late 2022. So that range will be updated at that point. It's possible that the median projection could differ from what the Vision 2050 has projected for our county. So that is another factor that we are taking into consideration as we have drafted up the versions of the land use alternatives that we have brought out for public comment. So now I would want to go through the draft land use alternatives. This graphic here shows the distribution of the existing population as of 2020. So that's the population that came out recently from the 2020 census. So that's a point of comparison as we show the growth alternatives. Next slide. Alternative one is our no action alternative. So under this alternative, we would maintain our adopted plan. There would be no amendments to the comprehensive plan map, the zoning, or the regulations. As a result, we would not expect there to be enough capacity to accommodate our growth targets for 2044. So this is a lower growth alternative than what the Vision 2050 would call for. This alternative would include the effects of light rail. So we would expect there to be some concentration of growth around the light rail stations and that the construction of those light rail stations, and when they open after our current planning horizon of 2035, that those would have an impact on development in those areas. But again, there'd be no changes in zoning to complement the light rail stations. Also under this alternative, the rural area actually would take on more growth than what our action alternatives would be accommodating. That's consistent with our existing plan to accommodate no more than 8.5% of county population growth in the rural area. And by as a result of taking a no action approach to the zoning within the urban areas, that does create pressures for more development in the rural area. And that's taken into account with this no action alternative. Under this alternative, the transportation network would be essentially what's adopted in our existing plan, but it is possible that new roads projects could be included to accommodate growth for the 2035 to 2044 period. Next slide. So alternative 2 is our medium growth alternative, and this one we call focus on high capacity transit communities. This alternative would be consistent with our adopted initial growth targets, which we expect to be adopted the beginning of next year, and also consistent with the Vision 2050. It would accommodate as much growth as possible in the core of the Southwest urban area, with an emphasis around high capacity transit stations, including the light rail stations, and also current and future bus rapid transit lines. This alternative would look at ways to encourage a larger variety of housing types within existing single family neighborhoods inside of the existing urban growth area, including opportunities where some urban low density residential areas could be redesignated and rezoned to accommodate medium density residential growth. And a big focus of that would be on single family development that is with smaller lots or attached single family to accommodate more opportunities for home buyers within single family neighborhoods at potentially housing units that are at a price point that, for example, a first-time home buyer would be more likely to be able to afford. This alternative could include minor UGA adjustments, and under this alternative, the growth in the rural area would be consistent with the Vision 2050 allocation of 4.5% of population growth in the county from 2017 to 2050. So we're planning for the 2020 to 2044 period. The growth allocation may not be exactly 4.5% over that period, but it would be consistent with whatever comes as a result of the initial growth targets. So we would be planning consistent with the initial growth targets, which we expect to be consistent with that 4.5% allocation from 2017 to 2050. Under this alternative, the transportation network may include new road projects that support growth to 2044, relying on a multimodal approach, including new road projects that support improved transit or freight mobility. And there would also be bike and pedestrian improvements in the Southwest urban core around the light rail station areas. Next slide. Alternative 3 is our higher growth alternative. So this factors in the possibility that we need to plan for a larger amount of growth than what the Vision 2050 calls for once the updated growth projections come out from the state next year. It's very similar to Alternative 2, but it factors in additional growth within the core of the Southwest urban area around light rail station areas. And this alternative would also include any of the docket proposals that the council chooses to move forward for consideration that call for UGA expansions. So this alternative may include some UGA expansions that are part of the requests that property owners submitted last year. Growth associated with those UGA expansions and with the additional growth in the Southwest UGA would come out of that higher allocation of growth that goes beyond the Vision 2050 population total. Again, accommodating as much growth as possible in the core of the Southwest urban area around the future light rail stations and bus rapid transit stations, and also encouraging a larger variety of housing types within single family neighborhoods to create more opportunities for people in those neighborhoods, including home ownership opportunities. And under this alternative, the rural area would again accommodate 4.5% of the county population growth, but of a higher total county growth. As for the transportation network, very similar to alternative 2, it would include new road projects that support improved transit or freight mobility as part of a multimodal approach with bike and pedestrian improvements in the core of the Southwest urban area and potentially other areas as well. This alternative would also include the need to extend the road network potentially to serve areas that are proposed for UGA expansion, for expansion of the urban growth area boundary. So that concludes my remarks on the alternatives. I will hand it back over to Kiz.
Thank you, Frank. So next we are going to move into a key topics discussion. Before that, I did want to note that I just added a link into the chat. It is to a story map, which Snohomish County put together. And if you click on that link, it has enlarged versions of the maps that were just in the PowerPoint. I also want to note that we can add enlarged versions of those maps into the final version of the PowerPoint that gets posted online. So thank you. For the key topics discussion, we are going to use Menti again, and we'll add that information into the chat. If you are having any issues using Menti, no worries. You can just respond to the different questions by putting your answers in the chat as well. And we'll be able to see that and add it to the public record from this meeting. So you can go to the next slide. As a reminder, the comprehensive plan includes the following topical elements: land use, transportation, parks, housing, capital facilities, natural environment, economic development, and then other county-wide topics. So here, this portion of the agenda really serves two purposes. One is to give us an opportunity to hear from you more in detail about your vision for the future of the county. And then two, to help us develop alternatives that reflect your key desires, concerns, and hopes. So Rebecca has added the link to join the poll into the chat. And I think, Lisa, you'll stop sharing your screen. And then Rebecca, you can share yours with Menti on it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, just a second, folks. Okay, are folks seeing what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Thank you, Kiz. Okay, see if you've answered, that's great. For anyone who didn't get a chance to join or test the Menti poll earlier in the meeting, I see we've had a couple people join. Please follow the link in the chat or go to menti.com and enter the code that you see at the top of the screen here. As Kiz mentioned, with this set of questions, we're hoping to gather your thoughts on key issues around the scope of the EIS. You'll be able to see each other's responses. Please do go ahead and go to menti.com and add to this page here with 3 responses. You'll be able to see each other's responses, but they are anonymous, and we will be exporting the results of the polls after this meeting and including it in a summary of what we heard today. We've got a few more folks. Great, thanks everyone who's able to join. You can always accommodate feedback in different forms, but it's great. It's great to see it up here. Hopefully makes for a more engaging meeting for you all too. And I think we had around 8, like about half of folks responding earlier, so I'll wait it out to see if we can get to that number again. Great, 20 folks, I'll take it. Our next question, and don't feel bad if you didn't respond before I change the slide, you can still respond and catch up afterwards. Your response still gets counted, even if you don't see it show up on the screen here. It all goes into a spreadsheet actually, so it'll be nice and organized for us. So our next question, what do you value most about living in Snohomish County? Wildlife is popular. A lot of nature. Convenience. I'll give this just a couple more seconds here. Okay, thanks everyone. And counter to that, what is your most pressing concern? As a reminder, we also have a project website with a comment form where you can provide a longer scoping comment that I will drop in the chat again. But please tell us briefly about your most pressing concern. Okay, thanks to the folks who are getting us started here. I'll move us on in just a few seconds. Okay, responses are trickling in. Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to move us along to the next question. So this question is recognizing limited resources, what do you feel are the most important topics for us to understand environmental implications and trade-offs of the different alternatives that we presented today? And for this question, we invite you to select your top 3, not just one. So do make sure you give us 3 of your priorities. It's always fun to watch priorities shift as folks enter their responses. I'll give this a few more seconds. See if we could break the tie. There we go. Housing and jobs is coming in on top. Natural environment. Okay, thanks everyone. With that, we will move on. And can you just share more about the EIS topics that are most important to you? This is an open-ended question, and we welcome you to submit as many times as you'd like. And if these small blurbs aren't enough space for you to share your thoughts, please do click that link in the chat and you can share a more in-depth comment. Thank you to our one submission, Respect for Cultural Resources. And thanks to folks who are putting things in the chat as well. Appreciate that. Okay, and I'm going to move on. Seems like there are maybe fewer thoughts on this topic. So let's keep rolling here. This is a ranking exercise or a sliding scale exercise. So this will take, a moment for you to complete, but it's very helpful to have this information from you all. So what is most important to include about living and working in the county when looking at different growth alternatives? And you can rank these as you see fit. If I recall, it's a click and drag. There we go. Thanks, folks. For the 2 responses we have, it looks like buffers are a top priority. A resilient community, 8 responses. Thanks, folks. Okay, we're almost up to 20 participants. That's great. With a slight preference for resilient community adapting to climate change. Okay. And this is our last question. What aspects of getting around should we consider when developing these alternatives? And for this question, I believe you're invited to select up to 3 different areas of concern. And interestingly, while I would expect to see your responses pop up here, I'm not seeing them. So maybe we'll come back and report on that information after the Q&A. But I'm going to turn it back to Kiz to hear some of your questions answered. Thanks, everyone.
Rebecca. Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks everyone for participating in that poll and also adding your responses in the chat as well. So the next portion of our agenda is the Q&A. Let me just double check how we're doing on time. Yep, we have a full 35 minutes for Q&A. And the way that this is going to work is we're going to go through the questions that are in the Q&A here. It looks like we have 7, and we're either going to type a response or answer them live. We're going to start with Marta's question, Marta Baldwin, and looks like Frank, you want to respond to that.
Sure. Thank you, Kiz.
Yep.
So Marta asked about one of the docket applications that's being considered. So those docket applications, which were opportunity for individual property owners and community members to request rezones for their properties, for specific properties, and in some cases also amendments to policies as well. And the deadline for those requests was October of last year. And since that time, staff has done an initial review of those docket applications and presented results to the county council. But there's going to be a reevaluation of the staff reviews of those docket applications, taking into account the information that we have now about the buildable lands report. So we have a little bit better idea what is the capacity in the county for accommodating growth, although it goes only out to 2035. And also the new adopted growth targets, once those are available. I believe actually they're working with the draft versions of those growth targets to work on those reevaluations. But so there is the expectation that there will be another briefing to the county council. I believe right now we're targeting that for December, and that there would be a decision by council on which of those requests would be moved forward. The docket proposals would be moved forward as part of the final docket that we would consider. And in most cases, those would be, if they are moved forward, those would be included in alternative 3. So the decision from the council on that question, we're expecting it could be in January or February. We're hoping that no later than February of 2022. Of course, we cannot presume to know when or what actions the county council will take on those. So there is still the possibility that the Southwest 8 application could be included. The decision on whether to include that would be made hopefully by next February.
Okay, thanks, Frank. So the next question we have is from William. William asked, why does the comprehensive plan not protect priority habitat and species, PHS, areas defined by Wdfw? PHS areas should be protected from development, just like wetlands. And I think, Frank, you're also going to answer this one. Or is that Sarah?
So, yeah, I defer to somebody else on this question.
I think it's a great comment to capture during this scoping period, and also we can delve potentially into it a little bit deeper in our frequently asked questions that will be posted after this presentation. Carol, do you have any thoughts about that in terms of the parks?
I don't think I have anything to add right now.
Sarah, this is Lisa. I can add just a little bit more, at least from the environmental impact statement perspective. We will be looking at plants and animals, including priority habitats and species. So from the impact statement perspective, yes, and that will include a summary of the county's current regulations and what are regulated today and what may not be.
Yeah, Sarah, I'd also like to add that as part of the 2024 update, the county will be updating its critical areas regulations. So that includes any new best available science, and that might capture the concerns of Mr. Leiter as well. And sometimes the best available science, as we update our critical areas regarding the environment and priority habitat and species, it might cover his concerns as well.
Okay, full team approach there. Thanks, everyone. So there was a question earlier from Deborah Knight, which I think we've answered about, is there another way to show the alternative growth maps, which you can visit the story map, which we linked in the chat above, and we can drop that story map back into the chat, and that has all the maps there, and they're of a larger size for you to be able to view. So then going forward, we have a question from Clay White. Hi, Clay. Clay asks, given the number of lots in rural areas, what measures would the county be considering to drop growth from over 8% to 4.5% under alternatives 2 and 3? Would appreciate a response focused on development regulations, changes versus policies. And Frank, it says your name is you're listed here as answering this. I'm not sure if that's the case.
Yes, yeah. So several of these I am definitely willing to answer. So, so Clay is asking about the number of rural lots and how it would be reduced in the action alternatives. So at this point in the scoping, we're really looking more at the high level concepts of having a growth of 4.5% in our action alternatives. And so if that is the way that we would like to move forward with the alternatives to accommodate growth, then we'd be looking at what types of development regulation changes would be necessary in order to implement that level of growth. I think you want development regulations and not policies, but from a policy perspective, one of the keys is accommodating enough growth within the urban area that growth isn't forced into the rural area. But it is possible that other development regulations would be considered. So over the 2022 and leading up to when the EIS comes out in 2023, we'll be looking at those more detailed types of amendments and bringing those forward for the opportunity for public participation in looking at those changes.
All right, thanks, Frank. The next question that we had here was from Tony, who asked, will there be improved density zoning for the far south Snohomish County area? I think, Sarah, you had thoughts about how to respond to this one.
Sorry, trying to find my mute button always takes me a second. Frank, you probably have some information to add here as well. Improved density. Yeah, and also potentially Jay with the information can provide some information. But Frank, do you want to go for it first?
Sure. So I'm not sure if any of these correspond to the docket proposals that have already been submitted, but just to reiterate that the deadline for submitting property-specific proposals did pass in October last year. There is still the opportunity to provide comments, and we will look at those and consider those as we're looking at what are logical UGA boundaries for alternative 3 in particular, to the extent that these may be UGA proposals, UGA expansion proposals. So I think that probably this question is more as something that should be considered as part of our comments as we're looking at logical UGA boundaries that would correspond with those docket proposals that are moved forward by the council. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd have nothing to add to what Frank said. That there are a number of both transportation benefits in this area, and there's some challenges in this area also, and that this would be good to be added to our comments.
Okay. Thanks everyone there. I did want to note that there are a few questions in the chat and that there's a hand raised right now, and we're going to come back to those. We just want to move through the questions that are in the Q&A first, and then we'll circle back with those other comments and questions and hand raises. So we have a question from Essie, who asked specifically, what will happen to the SWUGA in alternative 2? I'm not sure, Frank, if that's.
I can respond. So in the Southwest UGA, I'm not sure if you're referring to the entire urban growth area or to the boundary itself, but I'll speak to both. So under alternative 2, we would expect there to be significant new growth in the core of the Southwest UGA, which is the area south of Everett, north of Linwood, from I-5 over to State Route 99. And so that would be accommodated through potentially changes in zoning and regulations in the areas that are near the high capacity transit services that are proposed in that area. There would also be potentially changes in zoning and other portions of that UGA where there is the potential for creating more capacity for single family development within the existing UGA, again, with a focus on smaller lot and attached single family units that may be more affordable, for example, for first time home buyers. And under alternative 2, it's possible that there could be a minor adjustment to UGA boundary if that is necessary, or if it creates a more logical boundary that would be more consistent with maintaining a stable UGA boundary for the long term. But that's at this point, it's a possibility, but if it is expanded, it would be a very minor expansion that would be considered as part of alternative 2. That's again one of those topics that is something that would be valuable for you to provide a comment, whether that's something that you would want to see or whether that's important to you.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Anyone else from the county want to add anything to that? Okay. With that, we have a few more questions in the Q&A. We have a question from Kelsey. How will the SEPA scoping comments versus visioning comments be used in the process? That's a good question.
I guess your name in there, so I don't want to step on toes. Did you want to go first?
I can answer first. I didn't intend to answer this one completely, but as far as the SEPA scoping comments, if there are comments that are related directly to the land use alternatives, those are definitely comments that we will review and consider to take into account along with everybody else's comments on as we finalize the alternatives. So that's definitely an important part of this process. If you do have something that you want to see or that you don't want to see in those land use alternatives, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing those types of comments.
Sarah, I can take the visioning comment. Yeah, so for vision comments, we're very appreciative to get your input on what you think Snohomish County would look like, or what is important to you as the county grows from 2024 to 2044. So within that 20-year planning timeframe. Essentially, comments on visioning, it's really the aspirations of the community. And like a lot of the polling questions kind of hinted at, what's important to you as the county grows, what are the issues that are most important to you, and you know, how would you like to see the county grow, and understanding that there's a certain framework that we're working within, including state requirements and requirements from our regional growth strategy. Given that, you know, in terms of how the visioning comments will be used, we'll be forming a visioning statement with guiding principles to guide the comprehensive plan elements. So each element will then take and reference that established vision statement for the county comprehensive plan and the guiding principles to demonstrate how each element is really striving to reach that community vision. And we would greatly appreciate your comments. I believe you can either fill them in here through the chat box or visit our 2024 update webpage, and we'll be having a link to a form, and also the story map does have a form to submit your comments on the visioning in particular. Again, we really appreciate what you have to say and how you see the county growing from 2024 to 2044. So it's 20 years, and a lot has changed just since the last comprehensive plan update, how we do business, COVID. We have a new Cascade Industrial Center. We have light rail coming. Painfield has commercial passenger service. And I think the light rail is going to be a significant game changer, as well as a lot of the economic development that's happening in the county. So given that backdrop, we'd love to hear what you think, how the county is growing.
All right, thanks, Eileen. And I think we're going to add to the chat again the link to the comment form. So that'll be available for those who do want to make comments. So thank you. I see one last question in the Q&A, and then we have a few other lingering questions. So Clay, you asked another question here about alternative 2. And you said, has any economic information been developed to demonstrate how Everett would grow by such a large amount each year during the planning period? And again, this is related to alternative 2 and growth in Everett. And Frank, you're on.
I can respond. Sorry, I can respond to this question. This is a little bit outside of what we're speaking to tonight, and definitely that's a valuable feedback, and I think that has been raised as an issue as part of the growth target development process. For our alternatives, we would assume that whatever the initial targets are that are adopted by the county council with the input from different jurisdictions, that the city would plan to accommodate that growth. And so as part of the growth target process, there is the need to think about how realistic the growth target for Everett would be to be consistent with the Vision 2050, or as opposed to a different target. And we know that moving forward, when we do our land capacity analysis and look at the UGAs, that we'll need to make sure that we are sizing our UGAs appropriately. One of the benefits of including a higher growth alternative as part of the process is that it does give us the opportunity to explore different possibilities for growth, if there were need to accommodate more growth in the unincorporated UGA, for example, and how we would do that. So that is one of the values of having an alternative 3 that looks like that. I think at this point, it's you know, that would be either a comment for the growth target exercise, and it's something that the city of Everett would need to look at as they're thinking about their comprehensive plan. But if there is a decision regarding a different amount of growth for Everett, then there is also the reconciliation process that we would work through Snohomish County tomorrow after the 2024 update to think about that. So it's definitely a valuable comment and something for us to consider as we're moving through the update. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Frank. So now, yep, that covers all the questions in the Q&A. We are going to move on to the lingering questions in the chat and the hand raises. And we have about 15 minutes here, so not too much time. So we're going to try and get to what we can. There was a comment or question from Charles who added his thoughts into the chat along the lines of when will the county fix what happened to the citizens on 43rd, and will those citizens be protected from the havoc that happened on 35th Ave? Not sure specifically what that refers to. Frank, if you or someone else is the best to address that comment.
Frank, do you want me to at least start this and then you can take over after that? I also am not exactly sure what the havoc that has been referred to here. I can say that from the people who live in that part of Snohomish County, they know that there has been a lot of road projects and there will continue to be a lot of road projects in this area as we work to accommodate the growth that has happened in this area. 35th Avenue, the Seattle Hill Road corridors, we've been working on for a number of years. And on 35th Avenue, we're completing that project and have that all done. We'll also be working on 180th, and we have projects ready to go there. And then as far as 43rd goes, we are also have in our 6-year plan, it was one of the transportation element projects from the last update to bring that up to the rural standards of the adjoining area. Just also so that we can accommodate both the growth that is happening in the urban area, but then a lot of the rural growth that has also been happening through that area and connecting into that. So there's a number, as I said, there's a number of road projects going on in that area. Potentially that's the havoc that he's referring to. And we'll continue to work to keep up with the growth and the pressures for growth that have happened in that area.
Okay, thank you, Jay. With that, we would like to open it up a bit to folks who may have questions and may have had their hands raised for a while. So Caroline, thank you. So the way that this is going to work is if you have a question that you'd like to verbally ask, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and then we will enable you to talk from there and then ask your question. I see a hand raised from, let's go to Caroline. So Caroline, can you hear us?
Sorry, have I been unmuted?
Yes, you have. So you can go ahead and share your comment or question for about 2 minutes here, and we'll try and get it answered.
Yes, I live on 43rd Avenue, and the county council has absolutely done nothing for us since 2005. Our neighborhood has been up there every year trying to get them to close our road, which was only 19 feet wide, and you had trucks traveling up and down the road to put in the development at the end of our road. And the trucks couldn't pass one another. They had to stop. One would pull off to the side. And no one ever considered what we were going through. Are you not seeing what we are going through today? It's been terrible.
Kim, do you have your hand up?
I would like to see somebody else put their hand up on what we have gone through on our road. The county has not done anything.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Caroline. Frank, Sarah, does anyone in the county have some thoughts or how to respond to that comment?
Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so I'll start again, and anybody else want to jump in after that, that'd be great. Yeah, we understood the traffic problems along 43rd, and that is why that we temporarily closed that road, particularly because of traffic that we saw that was too much for the width and the condition of the road. And again, as I said, that is one of the reasons why we have on our project list a project that will bring that road up to the rural standards that is consistent with the adjacent land use. And so that then we can reopening that road again. And it is something that as the people live along that we're currently working on right now.
Okay, thanks, Jay. All right. I'm only seeing one other hand raised from the attendees right now, and that's Laura. So Laura, we're gonna give you a chance to share your comment. You have 2 minutes here to share your comment or question.
Okay, thank you. Hey, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I also live on 43rd Avenue Southeast, and I guess my big thing is that I'm curious about is the illogical boundary that was created, that we're basically a peninsula, meaning the UGA was zigzagged around to exclude us from the UGA. And so because over the last 20 years, all the development's been going up all around us, now a road is needed on our once rural dead end road that is, you know, according to rural standards, it's being built, but it's to accommodate all the new building and the new people that have come. And I think that, you know, how do I say this? None of us want our land, what do you call it, acquired by the county, which will eventually go into eminent domain, right? Because none of us want to sell it at the rural land prices. When all the buildings going up, none of us want to live here. If, I don't know, how do I say this? It just feels like a land grab, and we feel that it's hard for me to say this with, you know, and trying to be respectful, but it just feels like we've been, can't say it in public properly. It just feels very unfair. You know, land boundary, urban growth land boundaries, zigzagging. It's not a natural buffer. And now a road's going through our once quiet rural residential neighborhood. Can you guys comment on that?
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Laura. Sarah, Frank, Jay, any comments on that?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Kiz and thank you for your comments and knowing that everything that we say and we write here will be collected and considered and summarized in a report to help shape the overall scope of the EIS, which will then help move forward with the 2024 update overall. As Jay mentioned, it sounds like the problem or the issues are known, and there's effort to work on it. At this time, though, I think it's just overall, thank you for those comments, and we will be sure to include them in our process moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm not seeing any other hands raised here. Oh, Caroline, looks like you've raised your hand again, so we'll unmute you, and then you also have 2 minutes before we wrap up our Q&A here.
You know, our road has gone up to the county every year after year after year. And we complained about the road being too narrow and the trucks couldn't pass one another without pulling off to the side of the road. The cars going 70 miles an hour down the road. We complained and complained, and we told the county, what is it going to take to close our road off? For someone to be killed? You know, the county never said anything. They just sat there and one day, a certain person walked out to their mailbox to get their mail. And because the road was so narrow, the 2 cars coming up the road at too fast had to swerve into our driveway and almost hit my husband. I called Terry Ryan and told him, had you not closed our road off, everyone on our road would have sued the county because we had told you over and over and over that our road was dangerous and you did nothing about it. What do you have to say about that?
Again, thank you for your comments, Caroline and Laura. These are being captured, and we will be sure to explore these issues and move forward with the full scoping process. I don't know, Jay or Frank or Eileen, if you had any further thoughts on that as well.
I can just repeat what I said before. Is we did understand that the road was too narrow for the conditions. We did temporarily close the road. We have provided and are working on, continue to work on a design for the road, for improvements to the road. It's in our 6-year plan for completion. And when we complete it, then we will, it will no longer be closed and it will be open for that area. I can also say that we have had plans, not just in the last comp plan, but the comp plan before, for the need for an improved road in this area. It's necessary for circulation in the entire area. You know, too few roads. We get situations like we have on 35th right now, where all the traffic goes onto one road. The more roads that we can have, a better circulation that we can have in the area, the more that we can spread some of this traffic out. And that will be one of the goals that we'll have in this comp plan update.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jay. Yeah. Good comments here that the county's working on addressing. There's one last hand raise that we're gonna get to, and that is Dree. So Dree, we're gonna unmute you, allow you to ask your question or state a comment here, and you have 2 minutes.
Thanks. I'm Executive Director of Capital Projects and Operations for the North Shore School District. And I just have been putting in all of the polls, that it's important that we look at facility development along with growth. And I just wanted to comment that we're anxious to be part of the conversation when it comes to alternatives and how the county will grow and how that impacts schools and the development of schools. So I just wanted that on the record. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dree. With that, we're going to close out our Q&A portion and pull back up the presentation slides for our kind of last set of slides here. And Sarah, I believe this is you.
Yes. And thank you to everyone for taking part in the second EIS scoping meeting for the 2024 update with the comprehensive plan. Before we get into the discussion of the next steps and do our exit poll, I'd like to share how your scoping comments will be utilized and the range of topics that comments can be geared towards. Scoping comment period began on November 1st and will close November 30th. Although it is important to note that there will be further opportunities to comment on the EIS after this period ends, like when the draft EIS is published in 2023. There are also other opportunities to comment on the update more generally, like with the concurrent visioning process that was briefly discussed today and that is described in more detail within the story. If you would like to provide a scoping comment or a visioning comment, please visit the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update website or the story map to find links to the separate comment forms. Alternatively, you can email the project directly and put scoping or visioning comment in the email's header. The email address for this is 2024 or 2024 update@snoco.org, or you can email me directly at Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, .titcomb, T-I-T-C-O-M-B @snoco.org. Or if you have questions or concerns, you can always call me as well at 425-262-2128. So all scoping comments will be collected, considered, and summarized and put into a scoping report published in early next year. This report will help to inform decision makers and shape the scope of the EIS. County is therefore looking for comments that will help finalize the land use alternatives that we just heard about, which are meant to be different potential means of accommodating the growth that is forecasted for the county. Further, we're looking for public comments that will help focus the EIS on the most important environmental factors to consider, potential adverse impacts that may occur with the implementation of certain proposals, and the potential mitigation measures to reduce or avoid any negative impacts. Said in a different way, we know that growth is coming to Snohomish County, and we know that much of this will be within the urban growth areas. But what is the more fine-grained information that will help us need to consider so we can consider all aspects of this growth? Like, where should it be focused? Is there a certain growth pattern or mixture that would be most beneficial? Next, what are some potential negative and positive environmental impacts that the certain growth patterns that you want to see or are currently seeing could have? By environmental impacts, we typically mean impacts factors like air quality, soil, water resources, and wildlife, although we also want to hear from you about any environmental topics that we should consider and explore more fully within the EIS. With those potential impacts in mind, what are some methods to mitigate the potential negative impacts and increase the potential positive impacts? Are there any probable impacts that we just can't mitigate for? These are also important to record and provide to elected officials so that they can make decisions knowing the full context of their choices. Finally, do you have any comments about the draft land alternatives that you heard about today? These alternatives are not set in stone and will not be finalized until after the public, affected tribes, and other agencies have a chance to weigh in during this comment period. Scoping comments and public engagement are essential in drafting an EIS and comprehensive plan that will benefit and consider the entire community. We want to know what's important to you, so don't worry about framing your comments in a certain way or in plenarese, because it is our job to synthesize what we hear into a working document that represents both public input and the best available science, so that our elected officials can make informed decisions. The goal of public participation for the 2024 update is to equitably and inclusively engage a diverse population, especially communities that have been historically underserved, so that the resulting plan is well-grounded in the experiences and knowledge of the entire county. So please visit the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update website to learn more about ways to comment and get involved in the process. I'll drop the link to the 2024 update page, as well as the story map in the comments for you to click on as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And then Lisa, you are going to cover next steps.
Right. Thank you, Kiz. So we're just showing again the slide that gives you some of the dates that match some of the steps that Sarah was describing. So again, we're here in the SEPA scoping and plan visioning early in the process. Then the county council will set the growth targets and final docket, and that'll allow the team to prepare the draft plan and the preliminary draft EIS. And those documents will be issued for public comment. And then eventually, after the draft EIS, we'll come back and respond to those comments in the final EIS. So just a quick reminder of that schedule. So I think we had one final question here. I think, Kiz, are you going to kind of set up this question?
Sure. So finally, this is the end of our kind of scoping meeting and set of presentations and Q&A. And so finally, if you do have 30 seconds before you head out and head back to dinner, we would like to ask, just do you have suggestions for us for the next scoping meeting or future public meetings? And you just saw the timeline. And so tonight's meeting is one meeting in kind of a longer term process. So there's going to be a lot more opportunities to provide input and be involved. So any suggestions that you have here will be helpful to improve the process and help the county as they plan moving forward. So thank you. And I should also mention that this is another Menti poll. So to share those suggestions, you can either drop them in the chat or you can go to www.menti.com and then enter the code 2510-7709. Okay, yes, definitely zoom in on the maps. Yep, thank you. More outreach. Okay. Speak a bit slower. Great. We are not all urban planners, that's right. Good reminder. More experts, particularly on transportation and natural environment. Enjoy your evenings. Thank you. Kudos on the story map. It's kudos to the county. Yep, these are all great comments. Rebecca, are you?
Oh yeah, I'll just jump in here to say thanks for answering all the polls. We really appreciate it. And if you'd like to receive project updates, please share your email with us. It will not be shared publicly. Thanks. Feel free to put your email in the chat as well if that works better for you.
Thanks again, everyone. That concludes this second scoping meeting, and you can continue on with your evening. And if you have dinner plans, head on to those. That is it for the agenda. So thanks for attending.